All right. So number one, we know, is this a function, not a function?
It is
It's a function because it passes the
X.
vertical line test. That's a function. Passes the vertical line test. Okay. Now, how many set of ordered pairs are there?
An
infinite number. Not always true, but in most cases, what you're going to have, it's not going to be true though, but for us, most of the time, your domain and range will be an infinite set as well. So you can't list them. You cannot write a finite set here. It has to be infinite. In that case, since it's infinite, you're going to use interval notation. When we did this, you used, and get back to page 1, you wrote your domain and range in set notation. It was a finite set. You just wrote the numbers out. Here, these are going to be interval notation. You had this last semester when you did it, when you solved inequalities, and you were asked to write it as an interval. Remember, 3 to negative infinity, negative infinity to infinity, that idea. That's going to come back right here. Same thing applies with domain and range. You're going to write interval notation. All right, now listen carefully to this. To find the domain, remember the domain is a set of what?
X's.
X coordinates. The range is a set of Y coordinates. All right, now look at this carefully for a moment, and always go to kind of start this out. You read a graph from left to right. So and remember, these are arrows right here. So as I go from left to right, I want you to just notice something. Tell me something about the X coordinates. What's happening to the X coordinates? They're increasing. They're getting bigger and bigger and bigger all the way to what?
Infinity.
Infinity. Okay? Tell me something about the Y coordinates. They're also increasing all the way to what? Infinity. Y'all agree? All right. Now, whenever you remember in the past, whenever you wrote intervals, the smaller number went first and this larger number went second, right? Okay, so you went from small to what? Large. But then the question became, when I did this, when I was asking you, tell me something about these X coordinates, you saw that as I went from left to right, my point was moving along the graph, right? But where do I start? Do I start here and go along the graph?
No, you got to start negative infinity.
Yeah, because of the arrow. See, that arrow means it keeps on going down, right? So I could have started not at negative 100 or negative 1,000, but negative what? Infinity. So my domain, and remember in the past, with infinity to negative infinity, you always have to use what? Parentheses. You always have to use parentheses. Okay? So you can say parentheses negative infinity to what? Infinity. So there's your domain. So in other words, every real number is going to be a value for X. If I did a t-table, then I can use any number for X. That's what that means. So if I did a t-table, I can use any number for X. Any negative number, any positive number, and 0. The same idea for range. When I go along the graph, remember you read a graph from left to right. So as I go along the graph, see, you go from left to right. See how I'm going from left to right? And as I'm going from left to right, you see I'm getting these points right here, right? Okay. What happens to my Y value? It gets larger and larger all the way to what? Infinity. Now make sure you understand that infinity idea. So this Y value, let's say right here, let's say this Y value is 20. This Y value could be 50. This Y value could be 1,000, 100 million, and so on, right? So the range is also from negative infinity to infinity. All right, so that's one way to determine the domain and range using the graph. All right. Now let's look at the next one. You read a graph from left to right, correct? Okay, so now the issue is going to be this one. When I go from left to right, and I'm going to go along the graph like this. When I go from left to right, I want you to know something, and then I'm going to show you another way to do some of these graphs. When I go from left to right, there are no arrows here, right? Okay, so when I go from left to right, where does my pencil, I don't have a ruler,
Where the first.
where does the pencil, where does the pencil start touching the graph?
-3.
At this point right here, y'all agree?
Why is this X?
Yeah, well, I just want to be clear, a clear window. That'll be fine for right now. I think So when I go from here, I start touching the graph here, right? Okay, and then I keep on going, and then notice these y values. All right, let's talk about the x. These x values get bigger and bigger and bigger, right?
Mm-hmm.
They get bigger and bigger and bigger. Y'all agree?
So you hit that point.
They're still getting bigger, right? Aren't those x values getting bigger?
Oh, yeah. The X is
We're talking about x's.
Yeah.
What's this x value right here?
-3.
What's this x value right here? Let's do this one. What's this x value right here?
-2.
What's this one?
-1.
What's this one? What's this one?
2.
What's this one? So they're getting bigger, right? Even though it's coming back down, my x values are doing what? Getting bigger. They're getting bigger, and then they get all the way to what? 7, and then they start getting what?
Smaller.
Smaller again. So it's going from -3 all the way to what? 7. So from -3 all the way to 7. That's where your graph stops. So with some of the graphs, listen to this. When some of the graphs, when you find in the domain, you go along the x-axis. So you go horizontally like this. So when I go horizontally, I start touching the graph when x is what? -3, and then I have, and remember, every number's on this graph, decimals, fractions, and all that. So I go from -3 all the way to what x coordinate?
7.
7.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Do you always have to go up when you run? Like, see, you run in a circle like that. You always have to when you hit the starting point, go up. Why can't you go down?
You could go down.
Okay,
I just went around this way.
Okay.
You could go this way.
I thought that was a rule.
No. It's just that depending on what the graph looks like, it's sometimes easier to think of the domain as going along the x-axis and see how it touches the graph. So when you go from left to right, I start touching the graph here. What's that x coordinate?
Look at that.
-3. And I get all these values for x, all these values for x, all these values for x, until I get to 7. 8's not in my domain because when x is 8, do I get a point of the graph? No. The largest x coordinate is what? 7. Now remember last semester, for infinity, -infinity, you used parentheses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now if it's just numbers, like -3, 7, see -3, this point's on the graph, correct? And this point's on the graph, right? So you can use brackets. It's going to look like this. Domain will be bracket -3 to what? 7 with a bracket. So with domain and range, you're going to use brackets or parentheses. Parentheses for what? -infinity and infinity. Bracket for everything else at this point. Now next semester, you're going to notice there are going to be some parts of your graph that are going to have holes in it. In that case, some of this will be parentheses, some of this will be brackets. That's going to be next semester. But for us right now, everything's going to be brackets, except if it's what? Infinity or -infinity. All right, now remember when let me see if I have that ruler. Remember when I did this graph here, domain and range. Domain, I went along the x-axis, right? Okay, I could have done the same thing here. As I'm going from left to right, and remember this is an arrow, so right away I'm touching the graph. If I'm right here, am I touching the graph? Am I touching this graph? Yes, because the arrow indicates what? Keeps it coming down, so I'm touching the graph. Okay, so I'm touching the graph. I'm going from this x coordinate right here. Look at your x. This is considered, if it keeps on going this way, this is considered what idea? -infinity. So I'm going from -infinity. I'm touching the graph, right?
Mm-hmm.
Touching the graph. I'm touching the graph. I'm touching the graph all the way to what? I keep touching all the way to what?
Positive infinity.
Positive infinity. So negative infinity all the way to what?
Positive infinity.
Okay. For the range, you go along the y-axis. So go along the y-axis. So when I go along the y-axis, remember this keeps going down, right? -8, -9, all the way to negative infinity. If I'm at negative infinity, am I touching the graph?
Yes.
Because this arrow keeps on going down, so I'm touching it. So I'm going from negative infinity, I'm touching. So I'm actually touching now, right? I'm touching the graph, I'm touching all the way to what?
Positive infinity.
Positive infinity. Okay, because it keeps on going up, right? So here, domain and range, am I touching the graph here?
Nope.
Am I touching the graph here?
Nope.
I'm touching the graph here, right?
Yep.
What's that x coordinate?
-3.
All the way to what?
+7.
Positive 7. Let's talk about the range. For the range, I'm going to go along which axis?
Y-axis.
The y. Okay, so am I touching the graph here?
Nope.
No. I'm touching the graph when I get to what?
-4.
-4. See this right here? -4. Am I touching the graph here?
Yes.
Yes, in fact, 2 places, right?
Mm-hmm.
Keep on touching, keep on touching, keep on touching. Am I touching the graph here?
Nope.
No. Stop when I'm at what? 6. So you're going to say range will be from -4
4 to 6.
bracket
With bracket.
to what?
6.
6 with a
Bracket.
bracket. Now notice this one had parentheses, and it's easy to see why because I had what? I'm sorry. This had infinity, negative infinity. It's easy to see why because I had what here?
Arrowheads.
Arrows. Here, do you see any arrows?
Nope.
No. So you're not going to see infinity, negative infinity. Y'all see that? Okay. All right. Let's look at number 3. Okay, so let's talk about domain first. First of all, is that a function?
Yes.
Yes, it passes the vertical line test. So it's a function. Passes the vertical line test. All right, domain's easy here. To find the domain, you go along which axis?
X.
The x-axis. And notice there are arrows on both ends, right? Okay, so that means I'm going to ask you this. So here I am right here. So consider this right here. See this x-axis? Consider that negative infinity. At negative infinity, am I touching this graph?
Yes.
Yes, because of the arrow. So I'm going from negative infinity and just extend this to infinity. So I'm going from negative infinity. I'm touching the graph, right? I'm touching it all along here, all the way to what? Does it stop anywhere?
Nope.
Keeps on going. Keeps on going all the way what?
Infinity.
Infinity. So negative infinity parentheses, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's your domain. Okay, now let's talk about the range. So now listen, the domain had how many numbers in it?
1. The domain's got 2. Infinite number.
An infinite number, okay? Infinite number. All right, let's talk about the range. When I go along the y-axis and I'm here, am I touching the graph?
Nope.
No. I'm touching the graph here?
Nope.
In fact, I touched the graph here, right? And I keep on going. I touch the graph anywhere else. This is the only place I'm touching the graph, right? Tell me what that y value is.
5.
5 only, right? 5 is the only y coordinate on that graph. Kind of makes sense because it's a horizontal line. What are all these y values? 5. Is that infinite or finite?
Finite.
How do you write a finite? When you wrote domain and range earlier, and there were
with those squigglies.
braces. So it's gonna be a finite set with how many numbers in it?
1.
What's that number?
5.
And that's all you do. There's your range. The only y value is what on that graph? 5. And how many x coordinates are there though?
An infinite
An
number.
infinite number. Okay. All right, let's look at the vertical line. Is that a function or not a function?
Function. No, not a function.
It's not a function. It fails the vertical line test. Because if you look at this x, it's easy to see this without even looking at the vertical line test. These x coordinates are all the same, right? But how many y values do they have?
Infinite.
An infinite number. Okay, so it's not a function. It's not a function. It fails the vertical line test. Okay, now let's talk about domain and range. So just like we did with the others, let's talk about domain first. So If you need to extend that x coordinate, say negative infinity, extend this, positive infinity. So if I'm at negative infinity, if I'm at negative infinity, am I touching the graph at all? No. In fact, I start touching the graph when I get here, right? And if I keep on moving beyond that, am I touching the graph? No. So that means this is the only place I'm touching the graph. What is that x coordinate?
-6.
-6. That's the only one. So how do you write the domain of that one?
Bracket, -6.
Brace.
Bracket,
Brace.
brace, okay.
That's the only one.
I'll get it one of these days.
Yeah, one.
Now I went from squiggly to bracket, I'm getting closer.
All right. What about the range?
Negative infinity to infinity.
Yeah. So if you need to extend this y-axis, say negative infinity, and then up here, positive infinity. And remember, you always go from bottom up. Always go from small to largest. So if I'm at negative infinity right here, and remember, range go along the y-axis like this. If I'm at negative infinity, am I touching the graph at all? Yes or no?
Yes.
Who thinks not? Y'all agree? Okay, because of the arrow, right? The arrow means it keeps on going down. So I am touching the graph. So I'm going from negative infinity all the way to what? Do I stop here?
You don't ever stop.
No, because it keeps on, see that arrow means it keeps on going up. So I'm going from negative infinity all the way to what?
Infinity.
Infinity. So it's a range with parentheses. Okay? So at this point, notice that some problems, the domain and range had one value. The others had an infinite number. Infinity, negative infinity for some, numbers for others. All right, let's do number 5. Okay, number 5. Is that a function, not a function?
I think it's not.
Not
Why not?
Because don't those lines go vertical?
No. It's a parabola, so it's going to do this.
Oh, okay.
It's going to do this. It does not come back
In
up.
that case, it is a function.
So yeah, I didn't draw it very well, but these are parabolas. You're about to graph those. Maybe today you're going to graph parabolas, but it looks like this. So is it a function, not a function?
It is a function.
It's a function. It passes the vertical line test. Okay, now let's talk about the domain. So if you need to extend this and then extend this, it means goes to infinity, right? Okay, now I'm going to ask you this. If I'm at negative infinity, you got to look at this carefully. If I'm at negative infinity, am I touching the graph? Am I touching this graph anywhere?
Yes.
Yes, because this thing keeps on doing what?
Going a little bit further.
Going
to the
up.
left.
But it's going like this, right? So at some point, I am going to be doing what?
Crossing.
Touching the graph. So I'm going from negative infinity. Am I still touching the graph?
Mhm.
Yes, all the way. And in fact, you can actually see it now. I'm touching the graph, right? Does it stop anywhere? Tell me when to stop. Where do I keep on going?
Keep going to infinity.
Keep going to what?
Infinity.
Infinity. So the domain is
Negative infinity.
Negative
come
infinity
with
to
the
infinity.
parentheses.
Okay. All right. Range go from bottom up. Bottom up. So I'm going negative infinity, and this is what?
It's,
Positive infinity. All right. If I'm at negative infinity, am I touching the graph?
No.
No, because if you notice, both of those arrows here are pointing which way? Up. Are any pointing down?
No.
None pointing down. They're all both pointing up. But notice I touch the graph when I get to what y value?
-7.
-7. That's it?
Mhm.
So my smallest y value is what?
-7.
-7. So I'm going to say
You
range.
gotta bracket the.
Right. Range will be bracket -7, comma, and I keep going
Infinity.
all the way to what?
Infinity.
Because they're arrows that keep saying doing what?
Going up.
Going up. Now when I draw infinity, what do I put here?
Comma. You know,
Parentheses. Okay. So bracket -7 to infinity. Bracket -7 to infinity. Okay? All right, let's look at the next one. Now this time my arrows, this is
it's a parallel.
that's a parabola. So it is pointing down this time, right? But let's do the domain first. First of all, is it a function? Yes, it's a function. It passes the vertical line test no matter what. I don't want to draw the vertical lines because it's going to probably mess up with the idea of domain and range. But y'all see it does pass the vertical line test. It's a function, passes vertical line test. Okay, so if I extend the x-axis this way, that's negative infinity. If I extend it this way, that's positive infinity. So if I'm at negative infinity, am I touching the graph anywhere?
Yes.
Yes, because you see that arrow down here?
It's slanted and it's going to
Yeah.
eventually just.
It's going to touch the ruler. So I'm going from negative infinity all the way to what? Now, it looks like this is going straight down, right? I didn't draw it very well. It actually does this. Okay, that's what it does. So it's going from negative infinity all the way to what? Do I stop here?
No.
No, it keeps on going, right? All the way to what? Positive infinity. So the domain will be negative infinity to positive infinity.
And then the range.
All right, what do you think the range is? Write something down for the range, all of you. So I'll give you about 10 seconds to write something down and see if what you have is correct. What do you think the range is? Write it down. Don't say anything. Write it down. All right, so don't say anything. Okay, the right side, what'd y'all say?
Negative infinity to 6.
All right, anybody else on the right side? Anything different?
Y'all agree? Yeah.
Anybody over here? Y'all agree with her?
We concur.
Okay, it's correct. So for the range, you go along the y-axis, so that's going down to negative infinity, and that's going to go up to positive infinity. So at negative infinity, I'm not touching the graph at all.
Yes.
Yes, because of the arrows, right? So I'm going all the way. You can actually see it touching now. So I'm going all the way, and tell me when to stop if I need to.
To 6.
Stop here, because that's the end of it, right? There are no arrows going up. So it's from negative infinity all the way to what?
6.
6. But you got to say what here, though?
Parentheses, -8, comma, 6.
Negative
bracket.
6, negative infinity. Negative infinity,
Positive 6 and then a bracket.
6 with a bracket. You said negative 8.
Oh,
It's negative infinity. It's not an 8.
I know.
Okay. All right, we're also going to learn how to graph. Now, these are graphs of absolute values. So see if it looks like a V, that's an absolute value function. So is that a function?
Yes.
Yep. Pass the vertical line test. Okay. What do you think the domain is?
Negative infinity to infinity.
Anybody disagree? So if you need to draw this x-axis to negative infinity, draw it this way to positive infinity. And so if I'm at negative infinity, am I touching the graph?
Yeah.
Yes, because this thing keeps on going up like this. I am touching the graph. So I'm going from negative infinity all the way to what?
Positive infinity.
Positive infinity. Keep on going. Okay, now for the range, draw this to negative infinity, draw this to positive infinity. At negative infinity, am I touching the graph?
No.
No, because both arrows are pointing up, correct?
Right.
So I start touching the graph when I'm at what y value? Remember talking about y's here. 2, all the way to what?
Infinity.
Infinity. So you're going to say the range will be bracket 2 to what? With a parentheses. Okay. All right, number 8. Is that a domain? Is that a function? Not a function. It's a function. Passes the vertical line test. All right, and then let's talk about domain. So negative infinity, positive infinity. So if I'm at negative infinity right here, and I go along the x-axis, am I touching the graph at all when I'm at negative
Yes.
infinity?
Yeah.
Yes, because this arrow, right? Keeps on going down. All the way to what?
Positive infinity.
Do I stop here?
Nope.
Because of the arrow. So I keep on going, and so on, right? All the way to what? Positive infinity. Domain negative infinity, positive infinity. Okay? Now the range is a set of what? What kind of coordinates? The range set of y coordinates. So I'm going to extend the y-axis down here. That's going to negative infinity. I'm going to extend the y-axis up here. That's positive infinity. So when talking about the range, start at negative infinity. Am I touching the graph at negative infinity?
Yes.
Yes. So I keep on going. So I'm going from negative infinity all the way to
-2.
this y value, which is -2. So range, negative infinity to 2 with a bracket. All right. Number 9. Now notice that 7, let's look at 7 and 8 right now. 7 and 8 were an infinite or a finite set?
Infinite.
Infinite. 9 and 10, infinite or finite set? Finite. Y'all agree?
Mhm.
All right, you can count them, right? So when it's an infinite set, you use intervals. Y'all agree? If it's a finite set, you're going to use that set notation, the brace and all the points. For these, though, first of all, is this right here? Now, you really, this is the graph right here. That the graph consists of these 7 points. This one right here is also a point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 7 points, right? Okay. So does it pass a vertical line test?
Yes.
Yes, because no matter where I am at those 7 points, if I draw a vertical line, it only intersects it once. So it's a function, passes the vertical line test. Now these are easy because it's just a finite set. So the domain, you just tell me what your x coordinates are. You don't have to put it in a certain order. It's when you do interval notation, you got to go from small to large. So a domain, what's this x value right here? -6. What's this x value right here?
-4.
What's this x value right here?
-2.
What's this x value?
2.
This one,
4.
this one,
5.
and this one.
6.
Okay, so that's your range. Y'all agree?
Mhm.
So it's a finite set. So in that case, use braces. Don't put parentheses. Finite set, use braces. The range, let's do the points again. What's this y coordinate? 5.
5.
What's this y coordinate? 2.
2.
What's this y coordinate? 6. And all these have what y coordinates? Negative what?
-2.
Do I list -2 4 times?
No.
Just list it once. So that's it. Okay? Number 10, function, not a function.
No.
Where does it fail at when x is what?
-2.
-2. Y'all agree? That when x is -2 right here, when x is -2, it has how many y values?
2.
2. So it fails the vertical line test. But I'm going to go ahead and write it like this. I'm going to say it's not a function. Not a function. Fails the vertical line test at x equal what?
-2.
-2. Because when x is -2, how many y values are there?
2.
There are 2. -2, and what's the other y value?
-5.
-5. Okay, now let's talk about the domain, though. We can still talk about domain. Domain is a set of x coordinates. What's this x coordinate?
-7.
What's this x coordinate?
-5.
What's this x coordinate right here?
-2.
Just list it once. And what's this x coordinate?
2.
And what's this x coordinate?
5.
So that's your domain. The range is a set of
Y coordinates.
y coordinates. So this y coordinate right here is
7.
7. This is
5.
5. This is
-2.
this is
-5.
and this is, and these two are the same. So just list it once. That's what? 3. Agree? So that's your y coordinates. All right. Okay. Now, number 11. Number 11, function, not a function.
Function.
Yeah, it
No,
is-
not a function.
it's not a function. In fact, it fails the vertical line test in an infinite number of places.
Right.
So it's not a function. Fails the vertical line test.
Okay, so
Okay, now domain is a set of x coordinates. You go from left to right along the x-axis. So I'm going to extend the x-axis and say that's negative infinity. I'm going to extend it this way. That's going to be positive infinity. Now, if I'm at negative, remember, talk about domain first. So go along the x-axis. I'm at negative infinity. Am I touching the graph at negative infinity?
No.
No.
No. In fact, I start touching the graph when x is what? Negative 5. So the domain, you say bracket negative 5 all the way, that's negative 5,
Infinity.
all the way to, and then what?
Infinity with
Infinity.
parentheses.
With parentheses. Okay? So that's your domain. All right, now let's talk about the range. The range is a set of y coordinates. So I'm going to extend the y-axis. So I'm going to say down here, that's negative infinity. And up here, that's positive infinity. So if I'm at negative infinity, am I touching the graph?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, because this thing keeps on going. You can see it. See right here? So at some point, I'm touching the graph, right? So from negative infinity, and I keep touching the graph. Do I stop here?
Nope.
Keep on going, right?
Going forever, never, never.
Yeah, so this thing, it looks like it's come back down, but it doesn't. It should do something like this. So I keep on going, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the way to what?
Infinity.
Infinity. All right, number 12, function, not a function.
Not a function.
It's not a function, fails the vertical line test in an infinite number of places. Does it fail the vertical line test everywhere? I'm going to ask you this, everywhere? No, because at this point here, see right here?
At 4,
I'm sorry. Yeah, at this point here, it only intersects at what?
-3.
At one place, all right? Everywhere else, it fails it. It says an infinite number of places. Same thing here. It passes it here, but fails it everywhere else, right? So it's not a function because it fails the vertical line test. All right. Now let's talk about domain and range. So let's talk about domain first. So I'm going to extend the x-axis at negative infinity. Extend it this way, positive infinity. And you always go from left to right. Go from smallest to largest. So from negative infinity to infinity. If I'm at negative infinity, am I touching the graph anywhere?
Yes.
Is this ruler intersecting the graph anywhere?
Yes.
Because this keeps on going, right?
2 places.
Right, 2 places. So I'm going from negative infinity all the way, and do I stop anywhere?
When you get to 4.
When I get to 4. So my domain is from negative infinity to 4 with a bracket.
Again.
All right, let's go about the range. All right, range. Okay, so the range is a set of y coordinates. I always go from bottom up. So I'm going to extend this down and say that's negative infinity. I'm going to extend this up. That's positive infinity. So if I'm at negative infinity, am I touching the graph at all? Is this ruler touching the graph? Yes. Because it keeps on going down, right? So it's touching the graph. Do I stop anywhere going up?
No.
No, because this arrow says I keep on going, right?
Mhm.
So it's going all the way to what?
Positive infinity.
Positive infinity. So negative infinity, positive infinity. Okay? All right, so now, so we talked about given a graph, you should be able to determine the domain and range given the graph. Just use the ideas we just saw. Extend the axes going from negative infinity to infinity, negative infinity to infinity, and move your ruler from left to right, bottom up. Okay? Now, let's see. On this worksheet here, this is 3.6 part A. I don't think I gave you that yet. That one's easy because it's a set of how many points? Finite or infinite?
Finite.
Finite. You may want to draw mapping to determine if it's a function or not, just like we did. Remember that x and y, we drew the arrows. It's easy to determine the range and range, the domain and range. Domain is just a set of what?
X's.
X coordinates. Range is a set of y coordinates. Now turn the back. This is where you start getting the graphs. Very similar to what we just did. So these are all going to be interval notations, right? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. These will be interval notations. So remember how we did this a while ago. For the function, you're going to use what test?
Vertical and.
And just say yes or no. For function, yes, no.
Yes, yes.
Find the domain, find the range, find the domain, find the range, find the domain, find the range. Okay, so that's worksheet part A. Part B is this. Same thing, we talked about the circle. Remember the circle? Domain and range. Remember, go from left to right. There are no arrows here, so if there are no arrows, you're not going to see a what?
Infinity.
Infinity, negative infinity. Here's a line again. We talked about that. There's a vertical line. We talked about that. And there's a horizontal line. We talked about that. Okay? So that's part B. Okay. Let's see. You can't do part C, which is easy though. That's just evaluating. So that's an easy thing. You're just plugging numbers in, finding out what they equal. All right, so I can give you part C, but I'm going to give you part A and B. Okay? All right, part A and B.